These two individuals should not be allowed to walk freely amongst us until we find where Elijah is.
It's now been 1 week since anyone's seen or heard from this Wisconsin toddler. Now his mother and her boyfriend face charges of child neglect. And with days spent in the frigid Wisconsin weather, it's unclear whether the boy is still alive.
Being that it's been a week, it is Wisconsin. If he is out in the cold, it's unlikely that he survived. It's coming down to a recovery operation.
This is 3-year-old Elijah Vue. He was last seen on Tuesday, February 20th in Two Rivers, Wisconsin, about 30 minutes south of Green Bay. According to a criminal complaint, Elijah's mother, Katrina Bauer, had dropped him off with her boyfriend, Jesse Vang. Court documents detail gruesome accusations of abuse at the hands of Vang, who was labeled as the disciplinarian in Elijah's life. Vang allegedly told investigators, quote, "He has been trying to help Bauer correct victims' bad behavior." Vang also told investigators he'd been watching Elijah for about a month, but not consistently. Retired FBI agent Colin Schmidt, who worked out of Wisconsin while he was still in the field, says Elijah's case echoes one he'd previously worked in the Badger State.
Well, it reminds me of one of the cases I worked on when I was an FBI agent in Milwaukee as a very young new agent, where we had to work a kidnapping, and it ended up being the boyfriend of the mother who had kidnapped and sexually assaulted the child. And then as a team, we ended up finding the deceased child out in the woods. Frankly, it was in that same area as well. So when I was reading this article, it was very disturbing, and it was kind of hard to get through the article because it brought back some memories of working that case, and as well as the fact that I'm a father of 4 children. And it just boggles my mind on how anybody could be that cruel to another human being, especially a child.
According to the criminal complaint, Vang, quote, stated that victim is afraid of him, then corrected himself and stated that he respects me. Vang stated that they put Elijah with him as a punishment for his bad behavior. Vang indicated that he is trying to make him understand that going home is like a privilege for him. And according to the criminal complaint and all of the research, she dropped off her son with her boyfriend, hoping that he would make Elijah, this 3-year-old, a man. That's what she said. That was a direct quote from the criminal complaint. She wanted him to be a man. She wanted him to be disciplined. So I guess, does that make the mom even more culpable because she willingly turned over her child to this abuse?
Absolutely. It comes down to knowledge and intent. I'm sure she knew of Jesse's violent behavior. And then when she makes a statement like that, wants him to be a man, that's intent. That shows intent to have Jesse do harm to the child, quite frankly, in my opinion. So absolutely, she was aware of what was going on based upon those statements, and she is just as culpable as he is in the harm that came down on this child.
But before any charges were brought against Bauer or Vang, Elijah disappeared. According to Vang, he woke up at about 7:30 the morning of February 20th. After taking his son to the bus, he and Elijah went into the bedroom where Elijah was, quote, told to stand and pray near the foot of Vang's bed. He did not change the toddler's diaper as he was too tired. Elijah was not allowed to do fun things as he was in a timeout. Vang says he fell asleep at about 8 o'clock and woke up again at 11. By then, Elijah had disappeared. That's when Vang says he called the authorities. Court documents state that while Vang was sleeping, he would, quote, lock the door to the apartment at the doorknob, deadbolt, and with a security chain attached at the top of the door to keep victim from walking out of the apartment. I mean, what do you make of all of this? How would a 3-year-old be able to unlock a deadbolt? Does all of that add up?
Well, it comes down to how tall is the 3-year-old, number one. Is it logical to do any of those things? When they did the investigation, they're going to be able to tell a lot of those things, whether they're, verifiable lies, whether the lock was actually locked, what was the state of the house was in when the investigators got there. They're going to be taking pictures. And then it's going to come down to basically, does this all make sense? And did the child have a history of unlocking doors and leaving? My little guy, who's now 13, he would do that. He would go and open the door and go on a little walk of the neighborhood. So we ended up putting a deadbolt that he could not reach. And obviously that stopped the behavior. But did this child have a pattern of that kind of conduct?
But Schmidt says it's possible Elijah didn't just up and run away. He says Vang is likely behind the boy's disappearance. In your expert opinion, what do you think happened to Elijah Vue?
I think that Elijah pushed back. Jesse lost his temper and harmed the child. Likely may have killed the child, and then he had to figure out where to dump the body. And then obviously law enforcement found out the child's been missing for a week, and so now the search is on to find this body, find this child, and hopefully the child is alive. But the likelihood of that is very, very, very low.
An Amber Alert was put out last week when Elijah was reported missing, but still, there's no sign of the boy. We're in February in Wisconsin, very chilly temperatures out there, and Two Rivers is right along Lake Michigan. So I know that dive teams from across the area have been around to try to kind of search and maybe find something. What are the odds that he's actually still alive out there?
Unfortunately, it's extremely low. A week, generally, after the first 24 hours, the likelihood of finding a person that's alive goes down dramatically. So that's why we always talk about the first 24 hours, get out, see where they're going, because a human being in those kind of conditions, an adult human being, is only going to be able to survive perhaps a day or two unless they have the proper attire and food and water and all those things. And this is a 3-year-old child who, if they did walk out of the door, they likely walked out without a coat, without the gloves, without all the proper protective gear.
Volunteers in the community still haven't given up hope. As recently as this week, search parties for Elijah continue, as does law enforcement's investigation. How would the investigation look now, a week out?
Well, they're going to be doing basically the same things that they were doing at the beginning, which is canvassing the areas, looking for digital clues off of his phone, her phone, talking to all of his acquaintances, neighbors, anybody that and anything that can give them a clue on where this child might be. Once again, we've talked many times on the show that his phone is going to be likely the best option as far as finding the child, because it appears that he's the number one suspect of what harm may have occurred to this child.
When investigators spoke to Vang and Bauer, they allegedly admitted to abusing Elijah and even gave specific examples. They allegedly referred to the discipline as timeouts, but compared them to boot camp. This included making Elijah stand for up to 3 hours at a time and repeatedly chant, "I'm sorry, mommy." Vang also threatened Elijah with cold water, something he knew the boy was afraid of.
It's sadistic would probably be the only word that comes to mind that describes this behavior. Like I said, as a father, I just cannot fathom the depths of cruelty that this person was accused of doing. Now, I don't know for sure, just it's based upon press reports, but obviously they wouldn't charge him with those things if they didn't have a shred of truth in any of that. And frankly, if there is a shred of truth of any of that behavior, that is just appalling that any person would do that to a child. It's just, it appears that he was a sick individual himself. There's an old saying, hurt people hurt people. So if you looked into his history, he probably was a victim of child abuse. It gives no excuse for that behavior. And then when I hear a dad say, well, I'm too tired to change a diaper. I had twins. I was changing diapers all at the same time over and over again. So, to something like that, I would say, obviously, suck it up, buttercup. What are you doing? You can't step up and do the right thing. So it's obviously that household was full of true mental health issues. And unfortunately, the child bared the brunt of all the sickness that was in those two adults.
Vang was ultimately charged with child neglect and being party to a crime. Bauer faces the same charges along with 2 additional counts of resisting or obstructing an officer for allegedly lying about her whereabouts. She allegedly told investigators she had not been in the Manitowoc area on February 16th and 17th, 2024. But after voluntarily turning her phone over to law enforcement, police say they found she was in the area. Investigators also noted texts between Vang and Bauer, quote, where Vang tells Bauer that he is angry that victim overfilled his diaper with poop and pee and that Vang gave victim a cold shower. Vang noted that victim was clean but scared. Why may she have lied about her location?
Well, it's obviously she just wants to get herself out of trouble. Wants to lie so they can't pin something on her. And then she got caught because data doesn't lie. People lie, but data is data. And that's why law enforcement loves data, especially the data that you can get off a cell phone, because it tells the entire story 95% of the time, is as long as the investigators have the sophistication to get that data and look and find that location data. It really is the unicorn, so to speak, of law enforcement, and it really makes so many cases. But back to your question, yeah, she was just trying to lie to get out of trouble. She doesn't appear to be very sophisticated.
As for Vang, there's a long criminal history dating back to 2002 with multiple convictions, including criminal damage to property, intentional child abuse, battery by a prisoner, and possession of cocaine. And one of my contacts was a former police officer in Manitowoc, the county where this happened, and he lives in Two Rivers now where this actually happened. So I reached out and asked him, what do you know about the case? And he worked in Manitowoc for decades and says he remembers the name Jesse Vang, that he had been arrested multiple times, that he ran with a bad crowd. So this person was already on law enforcement's radar. I guess, would we expect something like this out of a person like that?
Well, you'd have to say a pattern is human beings are all going to fall into a pattern, one way or the other, a good pattern or a bad pattern. And then if they're not in that pattern, there has to be some sort of catalyst that pulls them out of the pattern. If he already had a history of misconduct and antisocial behavior, absolutely, that's going to lead to a greater level of violence until there's some outside catalyst, being at law enforcement most likely to stop that behavior and place him in a prison where he can no longer do antisocial things and harm people. So from what you just said, it sounds like he had a pattern of violent behavior or criminal conduct, antisocial behavior, and it ended up culminating on this poor child who was victimized over and over again. And it just breaks my heart to read a story like this.
Both Bauer and Vang appeared in court on Monday of this week, where they waived the reading of the criminal complaint and scheduled a preliminary hearing.
In state of Wisconsin versus Jesse Vang, 24 CF 162, appearances in the courtroom.
State appears by Jacqueline Labrie.
Mr. Vang appears in custody with attorney Heather Fay. This is a special appearance. Counsel has not yet been appointed.
The hearings lasted less than 20 minutes total, but Elijah's uncle, Orson Vue, made a compelling statement via Zoom.
Your Honor, our family would like to ask that the court does not allow or change any bail or bond amount, and have these two individuals held fully accountable for their actions or lack thereof. After reading just a few things from the criminal complaint, these two individuals should not be allowed to walk freely amongst us until we find where Elijah is.
Bauer is being held on $15,000 bond, while Vang is being held on $20,000. A preliminary hearing is scheduled for March 7th. And now we have these two defendants who are being held in jail. They have a preliminary hearing coming up. I mean, they're already going through the court system. What is next for the investigation? Will any of the area investigators come and speak to them again to try to learn more about potentially the little boy's whereabouts? What's next with all of that?
Well, harking back to the time that case I worked on, we interviewed the boyfriend multiple times, and then after we found that the dead child, he ended up giving it up, so to speak, and confessing to his crimes. So, if this Jesse, for example, is lawyered up, if it had not lawyered up, they're going to continue talking to him and use all the techniques in the toolbox to try to get him to tell the whole story. If he does get a lawyer, they're going to go to that lawyer and say, look, we got to get your client to talk, because it's not about him anymore. It's about a child. So the cops are going to continue to make any effort to get information out of Jesse and the mother. In the meantime, they'll be watching the phone calls, the who's visiting him, basically watching him around the clock to see if he gives any idea where this child might be.
But Schmidt says investigators could know more than they're letting on. Is it possible that they actually believe the boy is already dead and he's been murdered?
Well, it's possible. It comes down to the investigation. So based upon what the article said about the cruelty that was being enacted on the child, it's highly probable that the child pushed back, and that the adult male in this situation lashed out, and harm came to that child. So now it's being that it's been a week. It is Wisconsin. If he is out in the cold, it's unlikely that he survived. It's coming down to a recovery operation.
Let's say he's never found, no remains or body are ever discovered. Is it still possible that a murder charge could be brought on?
Yeah, it's possible, but generally speaking, law enforcement, or I'm sorry, district attorneys don't like to charge without a body, because the body is the ultimate victim. You have to have a victim generally when you have a crime, but they can charge without a body. And it sounds like a case like this, because it is a child, they likely would, because of the abhorrent circumstances that are around this situation.
Schmidt says Northeast Wisconsin has a strong sense of community that has likely banded together in the search for Elijah.
Well, it's a hunting community, so everybody's going to have dogs, and dogs find things like you wouldn't believe. So specifically, it's basically obvious they're going to be looking for clothing, shoes, if he had a backpack, anything along those lines, and then obviously the body itself. So the hunting community up there is likely, knowing Wisconsin, they're all banding together and they're out there searching and going everywhere. And unfortunately, it'll likely be some deer hunter that comes across this body, when they're out on a hunt. And it just, I wish, this kind of stuff didn't happen, but unfortunately in society it does.
If you have any information about Elijah's whereabouts or any details about his disappearance, contact Manitowoc County Crime Stoppers or the state tip line. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Gillespie.